Hello and welcome back. So far in this series, we have talked about OpenAI as the model we're going to use. We've written some Python code and we have been able to have a nice conversation with the AI. But this is about building a Discord bot that has moderation capabilities. So somewhere in this, we need to talk about the star of the show, Discord. Discord is a wonderful way to build a community of like-minded people wanting to share ideas. And having an AI chatbot can really add and enrich that experience greatly. Now we are using the Discord app. You can use the Discord web service as well, but the app makes it easy and works perfect for tablets, which is what I'm using. So first and foremost, you can either register a new account altogether, or do what I'm going to do and log into my existing account. So when we come back, I will be logged in. Okay, after going through the registration or login process, which may or may not be a frustrating experience, depending upon how you have things set up, you will get to some kind of a screen on your system. I chose a simple one for my example to make it easy to follow and understand. So let's get into the very basics of just what we are looking at. When you first start, you won't have anything over here at all except the plus sign. It'll be completely blank because you'll have no groups and no channels. Now, if you have an existing Discord account, then you'll see all of your information as is, for example, on my screen. But the part that we are interested in is the plus sign. We want to create a brand new server that we can work with for our testing and developing for our conversational AI chatbot. So go ahead and click on it or tap it depending upon the device you're using. Now you have several different choices. You can pick a predefined theme that Discord gives you, or you can simply create one from scratch. I'm going to create one from scratch to demonstrate the process entirely, including some of the most important steps necessary for setting up your server and things you need to take into account for protecting your server. Building a community is a very difficult process, and it can easily take years to really build a very nice community. So you want to really go through this process carefully and take your time. You can always go back and forth as needed and change it as your server grows. But for the time being, we're going to go through all of the most important parts of keeping your server safe. So click on the Create My Own. Now for the purposes of what we are doing, we're going to create this for me and my friends. This is going to be for testing the chatbot and actually seeing how well it works before we try to build something around it. Always test first in a private area to make sure you have everything working properly. Now we need to give the server a name. You can upload a picture, but we're not going to worry about that right now. First, let's give it the name. Let's just call it Companion Playground. Of course, double check your spelling. Make sure you're not like me, which is fat, fingered and so forth. Now you can stick a picture there, and I'm going to probably go ahead and do that just so I know what server I'm dealing with because I have so many. Okay, I chose a simple picture of my most advanced AI persona for this server. Simple and easy. So now that we have everything set up, and you don't need to pick a picture right away, you can do that anytime you want, or change it multiple times. So let's create our server simply by clicking on Create Server. And now we have people we want to invite, but we don't want to invite anybody, so we're just going to skip that. If you just start a server and a new account, you won't see that page. But where I have an account already established, well, it's there. Okay, so now we have our brand new empty server. And it is really just that, empty. The reason why the picture might be important right away, as you can see here, I have the picture I chose. If you have a lot of groups you belong to, like I do, keeping track of your servers is a daunting task sometimes. So having a picture right away that you recognize makes it easier for your work. Now Discord does go out of the way to help you in the setup process. As we can see, we have a setup progress step. We have step 2 of 3, invite friends. Well, we don't want to invite friends for obvious reasons. Right now, this is just for testing. But Discord does provide things that help you along the path. Right now, though, we need to get into the settings. We need to actually set this server up properly and protect our hard work. As you build your server, you are going to spend hours in here. This is pretty much going to become your second home. Building a community is not easy, especially in the early stages when it's just a one-man show or one-woman show. As you build and start getting people interested in whatever you have to share, that's going to make things a little easier to some degree, as you'll be able to get people who might be willing to help you maintain your server. But for now, it's just you and your shadow. And eventually that shadow is going to be your AI companion with self-moderation tools that will help you along the way maintain control of your server and provide a very clear and safe environment. Now let's talk about that environment. As server owner, you have to abide by Discord's terms of services. And part of those terms of services is keeping your server safe. Discord has very explicit rules regarding minors. Particularly anybody under 13 is absolutely forbidden to be on the server. And if somebody comes onto your server that is below the age of 13, it could cost you dearly. You could lose your community, you could be permanently banned, so forth. So policing your server is critically important. Keeping your server safe is critically important. And there aren't always a tool or two. There aren't always tools to make that easier. But there are a few, as long as you know the safety of how to use them. But we are building our own tool. That way we know exactly what we are doing. So let's start with that process. Let's click on the settings, and that is always done just by clicking on the title of your server. And the nice little pop-up that shows up really helps you out a long ways. So let's clear out that. And now we go into the settings, which is right here. This really is where the magic happens. The place that you need to spend your time making sure your server is set up properly. So let's get into it. And let's have some fun. Now that we are in a server, we have a lot of stuff to go through. And you're going to want to go through every single one of these settings. This is important. Take your time, plan it out, make sure you have a significant amount of time to really go through this the first time. You can always go back and forth anytime you want afterwards, but your first time here, give yourself plenty of time to really go through and read everything. So let's start with the overview. Click on it, and we begin to see the basics of our server. Things that we want, things that we may not want. It's a matter of simply going through and handling the system properly. So looking at our overview, there are a lot of things here that we want to talk about and that we want to decide as we go through our server. Of course, we have the server name, which we can change anytime we want. Once you set your name, I don't recommend changing it too frequently because it will foster a sense of instability for the people you have in your server. You want to keep your name because that is your identity, consistent as much as possible. We have an inactive channel. This is where Discord throws people who have stayed on the keyboard for more than 5 minutes but haven't done anything. You may or may not want this depending upon how your server functions. Now we get into some of the other little details. The system messages channel. This is important because it's where new people come. It's the welcome area. And it doesn't have to be your general chat channel. You can have a special channel just for this type of stuff that doesn't interfere with general conversation and chat. Some of the niceties, though, that Discord gives you is you can have a specific welcome user or a specific welcome message for your new users. This is nice and can create a warm environment. For the purposes of what we are going to do, we don't need this because we want our AI chatbot to do this for us. That is, we want it to welcome the new user with its own theme. So for that purposes, I'm going to disable this function. Now, prompt members to reply with a message, with welcome messages with the sticker. This is something that you might be able to use, depending upon your server, to help create engagement. But again, for the purposes of our testing, we're not going to worry about this. So we're going to turn this off. Send a message when someone boosts the server. Boosting the server is a bit of a premium system. It lets users get rewards if they help your server grow through boosts. That's a bit of a financial payment to Discord that helps boost your publicity and gives you extra features like larger messages. It's not really that significant for what we're doing, so I'm not going to bother with it. Send helpful tips for server setup. This is hit or miss depending upon your server. You may not want it for a larger server or for your intentions, but for what we're doing right now, it's not all that important. So we're simply going to leave it alone. Here is the part that really matters though. Your notifications. As you've seen from the top of my screen, when things happen, I get little pop-ups or notifications. This is how you can set your server up by default, so that when you get notifications, it can either go off on every message or only when somebody mentions your name. There's good and there's bad to this depending upon what you choose. And this is overridable by your users. That is, if you set your server to all messages, then it's going to send out a notification to everyone that is in your server that something was posted. They can, however, choose how to set their own messages. So even though you've said all messages, they might only want messages directed to them that they can set up in their own user profile. For the purposes of this server and its testing, we're simply going to leave it alone. But as you build and develop your server, this could be something that could help with engagement or be a problem if your server gets too big, or you might not want this constant barrage coming in. So that's really it for this section. It's pretty straightforward and simple. So let's go back and let's look at the moderation, where the magic is. And this is really critical. This is important because this is what helps protect your server against people that love nothing better but to ruin nice things. So take your time here. I'm going to show you what I believe is the best, most effective way to protecting your server. It should be on by default, and I don't know why it's not, but I'm going to demonstrate it so you can see what you need to do to really keep your system safe. And straight away, always go with the highest level of protection that Discord gives you. And that is, anybody coming into your server, you want them to have a verified account. You want to make sure they go through this step with the phone verification and actually have a way of making sure they are a real human being. This is an absolute pain in the hindquarters. It will drive you crazy. But it is one of the best ways to protect your server from malicious people. People who have their phone number on the line aren't as likely to be troublemakers as people who can simply join a server and have absolutely no verification process. The none approach is the absolute worst possible thing you can do. This is begging to have your server attacked. You don't want that. Always, always pick the highest level of security available. Go out of your way to protect your community, to protect the people in your community. One of your strongest selling points for your community is the level of protection and trust you build with its members. Take the time to show that you truly have that invested in your community and that you care about the members in your community. Now let's move to the next section. Filtering. This is, again, something that you want the highest level possible. You want to make sure that you have very clear and explicit intent behind your community. You want to provide a mechanism of trust and safety that will help your community grow and spread, particularly if you have the intentions of actually growing your server into a full community. And that is an important distinction because by Discord's terms of services, communities have special rules they must follow. Always choose the highest level possible. Always put the work into providing the best and safest environment for your community. Your members will appreciate it, and they will help spread the word if your community is protected. It's just like any other community of like-minded individuals. You want that community to be safe. You want your members to feel welcomed. So once you have your moderation set up, we're going to go back to the menu and we're going to go to the audit log. There's nothing really here except for random gibberish right now. When you first create your server, it gives you a generic invite that you can spread around and try to get your server to grow. For the purposes of right now, that doesn't matter. But as your server grows, things like adding members, adding channels, editing channels, all of that kind of information gets put here. This is a very important resource to help you protect and manage your server. For now, though, it's going to be a big empty void, which doesn't matter for this server. Now we get into the channels section. This is where you can create, edit, modify, whatever your heart's desire is for channels. For example, we have a text channel and we have a voice channel. Voice channels are nice because they let your communities talk back and forth to each other. Your members can share and communicate on voice as if they were right next to each other, even if they are on the opposite sides of the world. Text channels are great for conversation, reading, sharing thoughts, ideas, recipes, whatever your server is about. And this is really going to be the pinnacle of what your server is. For now, we're going to focus strictly on text channels. So click on the general, and we have the setup for this screen. Now, a lot of what is going to happen is going to be a back and forth, because there are other parts of the configuration, such as roles, that we haven't even touched on yet, but they're going to matter in terms of your server as things progress. So for right now, we have the title of the channel, General. This can be whatever you want within relation to what Discord gives you, and it will walk you through the rules and things necessary. But basically, it's one word, hyphenated, no spaces, all lowercase. Your description. This is whatever you want. So let's put something here. Okay, if my keyboard will cooperate. Every channel should have a description, and it should be meaningful. The more work you put into building your community, the better it is. Category. This is not so much important right now, but eventually as your server grows. Channels will need to be classified by categories. For example, gaming, cooking, events, art, all of the things necessary to help keep your server organized in a meaningful way. Channel permissions. Click on this one, and this is where we begin to really see some of the more important aspects. Let's start with private channel. A private channel means that only people who have a role for this channel or who have been explicitly invited into that channel can be in it. Right now, this is a public channel. So anybody who joins the server can see it. That being said, let's talk about a very critical point about Discord and really any service on the market. Just because it says private doesn't mean it's private. Discord is a public service. Legitimately speaking and legally speaking, you do not have the right to privacy. This is not a private process. This is a public open server. Do not expect privacy, even if the channel says it's private. Do not underestimate that. Protect yourself. Don't go giving out personal information in Discord. You have no expectation of privacy. Adding members and roles. Right now this isn't relevant, but as we build the server, it will be. So for now, we're just going to kind of gloss over this. But you could have roles like members, VIP, crafters, chefs, whatever your server's about, you could have ways of separating users based upon their role within the server. And the same thing for who can access. This is based upon roles, and we don't have any yet. Right now, you see that I am the only person listed. Well, I'm the owner of this particular server, so I will be listed everywhere. Now let's go to the advanced view. And this is where things get interesting. Again, we don't have roles or members yet, so we're not going to go into those details. But we have the rule, the one rule that the server gives you for free. Everyone. Everyone is the generic. This is what everyone gets slapped with when they first join the server. So this is where we're going to focus our attention for now. And all channels have access to everyone unless you explicitly remove everyone from that list. So click on everyone and you'll be given a list of things possible that can be done. We're not going to necessarily go through everything today, but overall I'm going to point out some of the more important things you want to be aware of for your general users. Manage or view channel. People that you want to see the channel in the list have to have this setting turned on. Now I'm going to show you other ways of doing this, but you would normally click on the green check mark. For now though, we're not going to touch any of these settings. And I'll explain that in future videos when we actually do make these kinds of changes. Let's move on to manage channel. This is dangerous because it gives them the ability to basically destroy the channel. This is not something you want to give every user. So this is usually going to be a red X, except for the people you really trust, like your moderators. And to begin with, really, your moderators aren't going to be anybody but you until you build your community. So for now, a lot of these aren't going to seem like very much. We're not really going to go through all of them, as I said, but I want to bring up a few standouts. Like send messages. If this is turned off, then this group, everyone, cannot send messages. This can be useful if you're dealing with restricted channels that might be for a particular VIP or membership service role. It's the same thing with threads, sending and creating. You're not going to want that if the channel is not openly public. Embeds and attachments. This can be a problem if you are a generalized server. You'll want to be careful with this and think about the consequences of what this means, because you don't want your server to be polluted with content that could get you banned or could get you in serious trouble. So for the most part, this should be disabled for the everyone role, simply because it can be dangerous and they're not trustworthy. Members might have this feature, VIPs might have this feature, but it should not be open to everyone. So let's move on to the next. Emojis, stickers, that could be something that you may or may not want, and add reactions. I personally like to use add reactions for everyone, but I don't like external emojis or stickers in my server. For the purposes of my server, my community, it has a very specific purpose, and I want that purpose to remain on track. But again, play with it, test it, check it out. That's the whole point of having an empty server and seeing what happens. Now this is a big one. The mentions. This can be very problematic for the everyone role, because it pretty much gives somebody the ability to join your server and spam your whole community. And that can be dangerous. Generally speaking, the everyone and the here roles should not be allowed for the everyone role. That is, you don't want somebody logging in, sending out some kind of message to 500, 600, or 700 people at once, and then disappearing. They've basically spammed your entire community. So generally speaking, I recommend this be set to a no. And only members or trusted people should get this privilege. The community is a privilege-based system in a lot of ways. And people have to earn the trust of you and your moderators to get these special perks. Manage message is something else that is mostly a moderator perk. Same thing with threads. Read message. If you want your users to read message history, meaning to scroll back and see what they've actually typed in the history, you're going to want to turn this on. It's basically a guarantee for just about every role, except for private channels that are restricted by a membership or a VIP status or something of that nature. At this point, really, the rest of this is pretty much no real need to worry about it until we get there. App permissions, that section again should not be given to everyone, only those you trust. So for now, we're going to go back to the next section. So clicking on the back takes us to permissions, and then going back even more, we can see notification settings, And we're going to click on that. And this is how you want to define the basic channel. Whether or not you want your server to send out notifications automatically based upon this content. All messages is just that. Anything posted in the channel gets broadcasted as soon as it's posted. Mentions only go to people that are mentioning them, and that could be important for large servers where you only want people receiving notifications when they're being talked to. Moderators typically use this approach to help filter the thousands of messages they would get on a daily basis. Or depending upon the channel's content, for example, if it's a channel regarding water-based paints and you're only interested in acrylic-based paints, then you may not want anything at all from that channel. So it all depends on how you want to set things up for your users. This helps. All messages is generally the standard, especially for new channels, new servers, because they want as much exposure as possible. As your server grows, you'll need to reflect about how this happens and whether or not it's a meaningful approach based upon the growth of your server. It can be changed like any other setting anytime you want. Okay, pinned messages. These are messages that are always stay in a special place, that are always accessible. Things like rules, things like what a channel might be for, all of that kind of stuff would be considered the perfect kind of resource for a pinned message. Getting ahead of myself. Invites. Invites are little links that a user or you can create to share a channel with the rest of the world. And you'll find one in the description below for this video for an invite for my main server. So those are all the things there that go through. We're not going to go into it much here because we're not that far yet. Age-restricted channels. This is an important setting. It is a critical setting, really. Even though Discord has a very brutal policy with absolutely zero tolerance for anybody under 13, you are still legally bound to protect children between 13 and 18 or 21, depending upon your legal jurisdiction. And certain types of content have to be restricted by age. Know your laws. Understand the area that your server will be in. Even if you don't think it pertains to your server, you need to be careful here. Because just because you don't think it pertains to your server doesn't mean that somebody in Germany might not think it pertains to the server. Discord is a global platform. The nuances of local laws versus what Discord has to deal with are a nightmare. Whenever a question comes up, whenever in error, Discord is always going to go with the highest. A good example is in the United States, there is a difference between an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. And that can be a problem in certain types of contexts. For example, a server discussing legal usage of firearms, proper training, certifications, and things of that nature is going to have to really walk the line on this, because some states allow 18-year-olds to be able to go to a firing range and properly train, whereas other states allow and force 21-year-olds. So this is critical. You need to take the time to understand your content. If your if your server is about cooking, and it's completely harmless cooking, then this is not going to be relevant. But if you do get into the more adult-oriented conversations, firearms, cooking, legal, things that can become heated and difficult, you need to think about this carefully. Now we get to the slowdown. The slowdown is a way of controlling the server. Companion has an automated slowdown mechanism that automatically monitors this and changes it according to the actual usage in the server. But there are cases where you might want a minimum no matter what, because of a high traffic server or a lot of messages coming in quickly. So you'll want to set this appropriately. For the purposes of what we're doing right now, we're not going to worry about this. But if you get to a very large server, this will become a major consideration. Now, idle activity of a channel. This depends on how many messages your channel receives. Basically, you can decide how long to keep a message in a channel before it disappears from view. That is, Discord will give you a load more button at the top of the channel to go back in the history. For the most part, and for right now, we're not going to worry about this. It really doesn't matter for what we're doing for this system. But you'll want to pay attention to it as your channels grow. To begin with, on a new server, to help keep things lively, you might want to set it to 1 week. That way, messages stay visible for 1 week. This is a useful technique for helping to promote a channel or helping to generate traffic in the channel. Integrations. This is an interesting one because it talks specifically in relation to bots communicating with Discord. And this is really where we are going to be spending a lot of time. But not so much through the settings of the server itself, but through the bot itself, because it will integrate into Discord on its own. But this is where you add third-party programs, whether it be moderator tools, chat servers like Companion, or other useful tools that could help you manage and maintain your server. You'll want to be careful with that because some tools are malicious and will only do their best to destroy your server. So don't just take anybody's word for it for joining a bot to your server. Always look it over, always find out what it does, and always verify its integrity. And that's it for channel settings. Short, sweet, and simple. So as we go back, we have the integrations here as well, which is more of a global viewpoint. We're not going to really deal with it here. Emojis. This is where you can upload special custom emojis to your server. It's a nice touch. It adds to the server. It helps create a interesting environment for your theme. We're not going to really talk about it much here, but it's certainly worth looking at on your own private server and exploring it. Security. This is another area we need to go through extensively. It is a simple area, but an important area. And right off the bat, the one thing with this that's important, and I'm not going to go through it here, but in your server, and I've done this on my main server, you want to protect your owner's account. So you want two-factor authentication. I will say first and foremost, this is an absolute royal pain. Beyond all reasonable doubt, this is a headache. But so is protecting your community. It is very important that you take as many steps as possible to protect your community from somebody trying to steal it. Take the time, go through this, set it up. The more layers of security you can put on your community, the safer it will be and the more protected your members will be. Don't take these shortcuts, because if you end up with a bot, a common bot like Carl or Me6 that gets hacked and you don't have two-factor authentication, you could end up losing your whole server. It's worth the headaches. Going back, we're not going to deal with community at all because there's a lot of things there that deal with requirements that we're nowhere near meeting, like having 500 members, certain goals that have to be met, and so forth. So we're just going to skip over that whole section. We're not going to get into server subscriptions either, because at this point, we don't have anything for anybody to subscribe to. We're going to get into user management, though. That is going to be the big area. This is really one of the biggest parts of running a Discord server, and one of the most important parts that a moderation system needs to help you with. Companion does that automatically, and through the course of this series, we're going to demonstrate how to actually leverage AI into being able to help you moderate your server. So let's get into some of the details and start with the members. This is your members list. The people who share the same theme, thinking process, and desires as you do for joining your server. And right now, since I just created this server, it's only me. And if you click on it, you see the basic moderator screen for the user. You can add a nickname, you can edit the roles of the user. For example, if they're a member, a VIP, somebody who has provided special circumstances for the server, or if you end up with a user who is just a pain and you no longer want to deal with them, you can kick them out. But kicking them out doesn't stop them from rejoining. If they become a real pain and you just don't want to deal with them ever again, you can ban them. So Discord does provide basic tools for helping you protect your server. So let's go back and let's look at roles. This is where you create the roles, members, cooking, painters, whatever roles are necessary for your system. We're not going to go through this very much right now because this is just a very basic overview. But this gives you an idea of just what you can do and how you can make your community stand out based upon you as the owner, people you choose as moderators, people who have special circumstances like a chef versus a home cook, different levels that you can provide and give to your members with different perks and privileges. For example, if you want to give a user a role that lets them post links, all of that is the kind of stuff you set up here. It's not complicated, and it's really worth going through and playing with it on an empty server and really seeing just how well it works. It's really a nice system with a lot of rich and robust features. Invites. These are server invites on a global scale. Basically, if you have multiple channels, you will see these all over the place. And finally, bans. This is where you have people that you've banned. They've just become a problem. They've disrupted the safety and harmony of your community, and you don't want to deal with them anymore. So this list has their names. That really is the basic part of setting up a Discord server. It's short, sweet, to the point, and really a nice way to go. And of course, your server right now is basically an empty echo chamber. But through the next video, we are actually going to connect the bot to Discord and actually have a working Discord bot. That is, we're going to build a very simple Discord bot and connect it. And then the video after that is we're going to put it all together with an AI and a Discord bot and go back and forth and really make a nice working system we can build on. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Share your thoughts. Ask questions. If I've missed something that you felt needed to be explained a little better, let me know. Thank you for watching, and until next time.